Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the MarketsWiki Education history-focused video series and more.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor JLN Video Series.
Many include a recurring theme of people helping others during critical times in their trading careers.
Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person.
Advantage prioritizes you.
Personalized service, competitive pricing, aimed at giving you every advantage.
Make us your advantage.
Advantage Futures. I had to do my civil service. Back in the early 90s, French young men had to do either military service, 10 months, or civil service, 16 months. And I was fresh out of my business school and hired in the bank. And basically, all young men were trying to find an interesting spot. And basically, I was hired by the bank on the premises that if I was successful in the first 6 months, then they would send me a civil service position on the floor of the IP. I followed a scientific background, mathematics and physics mostly. And then after baccalaureate, either you go to university or you go to another system in France called Grandes Écoles, which is basically preparatory school to go to either engineering school or business school. The truth and the honest, humble thing was I wanted to become a pilot. And during my civil pilot, but during my year of preparation school, unfortunately, my vision got impaired because we were working so much and I couldn't do that. So eventually I rewrote in myself and I made preparation school in business school, and I became a student in a business school in France called HEC. We did not own personally or lease a membership. As I can tell you, look at me. I was a trader that was getting the pay of a soldier on the floor. So let alone forget about getting a membership or buying a membership. That was a membership of the bank. The bank at the time was Société Générale. And I remember very fondly of those days where the banks was basically decided that they wanted to send a bunch of young kids on the floor and maintain both trading on the floor and trading upstairs for options market making. I'm quite fond of reminding myself of from time to time. We had a bunch of young kids from France, like myself, joining as market makers, usually sharp and pretty heavily involved in volatility trading and Greeks. And from time to time, like anyone else on the floor, we needed flashers, we needed runners. And one of my proudest memory, to be honest with you, was my good friend, who became eventually a good friend of mine, John O'Dwyer, Irish, young lad in London, that was coming straight out of the floor on the futures pit. And he became a runner and a flasher for me. And I was very slowly trying to teach him everything I knew about options trading. And he did learn. And I'm telling you, one of the proudest moments in my life when I saw him become himself a market maker. Eventually, as you may know, on the IPs, contrarily to the boys in the US, even though a few boys in the US were coming on the IP floor at the time, there was long hours. And for me, the only issues I had physically was vision. As an option market maker, you constantly had to be looking up to the board, to be looking at the futures stick where it was standing, and write back down on your pricing sheets, because at the time we did not have iPads or anything like that were bringing up our pricing models and our calculations for options prices. We were printing our sheets ourselves early in the morning. So to always go back up and down, eventually that was tiring for the eye. And at the end of the day, from time to time, your eyes couldn't adjust from a long distance to a short distance. You know, on the IPE floor, there were two rings, two pits. The futures pit was the largest one. The options pit was more discreet, more, I would call it maybe more cerebral. Nonetheless, we were, from time to time, it was getting busy. I remember that everybody that was fumbling and get caught on the camera, people were going back to the cameras to be looking at how bad of a fumble it was. And I do remember I majorly fumbled one day on the steps of the ring. Another instance that was also both funny and sad, but I had an argument with an American broker that I felt was not giving me my fair fill or share after I gave a quote like at the same time as another market maker. He was supposed to serve me like another market maker, and it didn't happen that way. That was his discretion. Nonetheless, I was pissed off. I let him know, and he was basically twice my size. But eventually, we came to hands, and eventually got caught on tape. I got fined, and that was it. It's a strange thing to say, but it can get lonely. It can get lonely. Some of the times I spent on the floor were also times that some months the market goes very quiet. And you do realize at the time that for all the excitement, you going to the floor, printing your pricing sheets, talking to the people upstairs, giving you instructions about what's happening on volatility trading on the OTC side, you sometimes are faced with the situation that nothing happens for hours. And at the same time, you have to maintain being alert, and you get bored. So there were times that you were just plainly getting bored. So you had to find alternative occupations that was not taking you too far away from the trading floor. Because typically what would happen is that if market makers were stepping outside the floor, something would happen and you would miss it. And basically that was your whole day gone. My worst day actually was not happening while I was on the floor, but my worst day was rebinding and recalling somebody great that unfortunately passed away on 9/11. And he was my Dinwiddie broker. Eventually, he was once a year, he was hired at the time he was working, I believe, at Credit Agricole, and once a year he was attending some kind of a corporate meeting in the towers. And that was very sad. He used to be called the Mambo King on the floor, and we all remember him well. It's demanding physically, it's demanding mentally. It's not demanding mentally, actually, it's demanding in terms of sharpness. You need to remain sharp. You need to have a clear head. It depends an acute sense of paranoia from time to time. You believe that the people that are on the trading floor are the people that are the best informed in the world. They're kind of the worst people informed in the world, because when something really bad happens in the world, the people that are sitting in front of the Reuters, they learn it like a minute before you do. Then you hear some people shouting, and then you figure it out afterwards. So you need to be very careful at those times. Getting to know people. You just what is fantastic about the floor, what I found exciting about the floor, it is a great equalizer. This is where you meet people coming from all over the world, maybe for the first time in my life, coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. Don't have to be coming out of a brilliant preparation school or a brilliant university, and you can be very efficient. And that was a good lesson for me, to be respectful no matter where you're coming from and what backgrounds you are coming from, because on the floor, everybody is the same. I mean, one order is one order, a trade is a trade. Wherever you're coming from, everybody is the same. Obviously, locals, they were just collecting the money they were skimming off on the market making side. And, 1 penny here, 1 penny there on the 50 lots or 100 lots, eventually you're talking real money. I do not believe back then, back in the early 90s, that the salaries were very high, the same way we saw people making tons of money as a pure salary on the floor. I think that the pay structure on the floors actually is usually very, very low salaries or fairly low salaries. And most of what you make or what you bring as an added value or what you are able to collect as a trader is your remuneration. Here as well, it's a great life lesson. I mean, you have no security. I suspect that the people that were good traders, could be making very good money, definitely several £100,000 a year if they were good traders, and not through salaries, mostly through bonuses, because their company structure was designed like that. I would not be able to tell you which day it was, but it is one of those days where there had been, it was not the Russian coup, because the Russian coup happens before, but maybe one of the echoes of the Russian coup, where eventually there was two pits on the floor of the IPO, the gas oil pit and the Brent pit, and both had options. And you eventually were trading as a gas oil options or crude options. I do remember instances where from time to time there had these major Norwegian state oil companies that were trading lots of options, and both upstairs OTC and on the floor. And they were trading it usually not as a volatility play, but directionally. And sometimes the guy was coming in and he was selling tons of straddles or tons of symmetrical options. And basically you had to be juggling those. Great trades, great days in trading happen where you actually can put your fingers on an actual profit you can book in the same day. So you end up buying at some stage early in the morning a ton of straddles. Don't have to do any deltas against that. So you just let them sit naked. All of a sudden the market starts to tick up or to move. You re-hedge a little bit, or you don't, you let it fly. And eventually somebody comes in, the volatility starts rising because there's some news out, and the ton of gamma and the ton of Vegas that you accumulated early on, all of a sudden start to turn into real money. And if you are able to capture that back onto the floor, then that was a great day of trading. Because I didn't live a war time, I always thought that bear markets were always sharp and very destructive. Whereas I always felt like I've seen on crude times and again, slow rallies. And obviously that discounts news-driven rally where, you know, something very, very bad happens in the world. All of a sudden you have a market explosion when it becomes fully news-driven. But I always thought that from a volatility trader standpoint, rallies had a tendency to be slow going, and price drops had a tendency to be aggressively sharp. So you had a natural advantage to be gamma positive on the downside and to be gamma negative slightly on the upside. Yeah, that was an off the floor error. I had the position on natural gas options. We were just starting to trade natural gas options as a volatility trader on the floor of the NYMEX on the Henry Hub options. And I had accumulated a significant position OTC cash settled. And we were coming towards the expiry of those options. I was having a book where I was mix and matching OTC options and floor options. Because the OTC options were cash settled, those options that were in the money, I had to post them as an MOC, an MOC, market on close order on the floor, in order to replicate the position that I would get with my futures, my options on the futures exchange. And sometimes you execute an MOC and you're trying to get your brokers to replicate the settlement of the day. And the closing range on the Henry Hub sometimes is murder. I ended up losing, I think like $150,000 on an MOC order on an undisclosed number of lots, where even though my broker was trying to match the settlement of the floor, he just couldn't. And that was a bad moment. That was retrospectively a bad moment to have an OTC option book and a futures option book commingled into one book. You need to keep your morale. So you like to crack jokes on one another, to pull pranks, to search anagrams. One of the locals was like a world specialist in making anagrams, reading books, calling friends from time to time, but also engaging into many conversations about things that have absolutely nothing to do with the market. And again, what was fostering all those conversations is people coming from different backgrounds. As a market maker, the broker is both somebody that you depend from to get business from when they're going to allocate you some of the papers they have in their hand. And at the same time, you provide them with a pricing service because they request people like you to give them prices on options. And it is a relationship that you have to build in the long run, hopefully built on respect and on a great deal of friendship, if possible. That's not always possible. And when it's not possible, you still have to remain professional, even as you know that you're not going to be served in a fair way. That's part of life. Life is not always fair, but overall, what I liked about it is, regardless of you being an options market maker or a broker, as a community, as a constituency of participants, you depend on one another in a global ecosystem, which is the floor. Some of the locals can try to be sometimes overpowering, not that much in the UK, more like in the US. Some of the other locals, in other instances, locals are too small. So when it comes to be splitting a juicy trade, we know that the local has been going through a rough patch. Sometimes you're going to give him a disproportionate portion of a good trade because you know that he needs it. Not all the time, but from time to time, if you're friendly, because you know that for him, it might make the biggest difference. Obviously, when you are an employee in a bank, money is important, but is not as important as if it's your own dime. Because in their own lives, they're going through so many ups and downs, they know that the next up can never be too far away from your next down. And there is always a time for giving back when you are sitting atop the hill. And this is why I've always been seeing people having philanthropic habits on the floors of exchanges more than maybe across a regular cross-section of any community. The floor itself is a life lesson. It teaches you how to respect one another when you truly believe that the person in front of you deserves to be respected. You need to be able to channel your anger in such a way that doesn't become too destructive from time to time. You need to be able to focus even sometimes when you don't feel like it. It's a great life lesson. I mean, to be honest, if you're a 20-year-old today and you will never know the floor, I feel bad for these guys because they will never know what it brought as a sense of a community to be working on the floor. It's really special. I had two mentors, and they both were Societe Generale options market makers. They were senior when I was junior, and now they are veered across different stages in their life. One is a very successful executive in the utilities, and the other one is, I guess, still in Paris as well, but training for himself most of the time. I'm not going to give their names. Maybe they will recognize themselves. They taught me everything I know about trading. I mean, they are both crazy in a way, but also fantastic human beings because they know how to put pressure on people in such a way that eventually extracts the best out of you. To try to give the advice to the board of directors of ICE that the takeover of the IPE was the sure thing that eventually is going to be taking ICE to the next level. And eventually, the operation happened. It was a fantastic deal for ICE. They managed to purchase the IPE for a great price. And it was, as you can only imagine, involving quite a great deal of negotiations with the shareholders of the IP, meaning that the people that were holding all the membership seats on the floor of the IP. There was quite a few of them. But that is really, I believe, if I can be proud of one moment, that would be it. Sprecher tried to pitch ICE to NYMEX, and the NYMEX people laughed him out of the room. He was trying to be the OTC market to the NYMEX. He had redeveloped entirely from scratch the matching engine of a small power company, power exchange in California called CPEX, Continental Power Exchange. And with his hat in his hand, he went to the board of NYMEX and said, here it is. I redeveloped this. I really believe that you should guys consider this. And he was literally laughed out of the room. And this is how eventually ICE came to recruit a bunch of shareholders with whom that he struck an order flow agreement on the OTC side. It was a two-parter, really. The first part was really in the negotiations, the initial order flow agreement, which is basically to say our company, among other companies, I mean, good names, the J. Aarons, Stanley's, some of the large crude oil companies, the integrated majors, BP, Shell, and Total, around the table and say, okay, we will commit ourselves to put some transactions on your platform in exchange for which, for a period of time, in exchange for which you will grant us some equity in the company, which he did. And that was a strike of genius of Mr. Sprecher, is to be basically giving away most of the equity of his company to the initial order flow agreements that the important, I guess, companies of the day made happen. So that was the initial stage. That was the negotiation of those order flow agreements. And the second part, which was also very important, was the thing that I just mentioned before, is how to go beyond. It was, as you may recall, a fantastic time because ICE was going head to head with Enron. It was the big days of Enron Online, a few months before Enron go kaboom. And all of a sudden, Enron Online and ICE were competing, except that Enron was basically trying to be the market maker by himself to the rest of the world. So eventually that would end up in tears. And basically ICE was alone left standing and grew. And the second part was basically how to further create value in ICE. And that was basically commingling a futures price stream to an OTC price stream, like I mentioned before. And the first operation, one of the things that I did as a founding board member of ICE was to advise them that they should be considering the takeover of the IP. Well, I can tell you exactly when. That was in 2000, because we were hired to push electronic trading. We were part of the pioneers that pushed electronic trading next to Enron Online until Enron Online disappeared, to push electronic trading on the ICE. So we were very attentive on how to trade OTC electronically. I guess we were maybe the first generation of electronic traders, very different from what it is today. We were trying to replicate what we had seen in the analog world into the digital world. And obviously it eventually evolved further and further. My civil service ended up 16 months after it started. So as a consequence, because remember, I was only paid a soldier's pay on the floor. That was like a few hundred euros a month. We basically were, with Jerome, the cheapest market makers on the face of the earth. And after that, typically we would be sent back upstairs trading in Paris. And if it did happen well, like fortunately it did for me, the people were happy. So that was my first occasion, an opportunity to be sent in expatriation to New York on the trading outfit upstairs at Société Générale in New York, and I was quite happily doing so just 1 month after leaving London. After I was a trader on the floor, I ended up working for a number of years at Societe Generale, upstairs in New York, twice 3 years. Eventually met my wife in the US, had my first two kids in the US, came back in 2000 in France for the purpose I just indicated earlier, which was to be the contact person for ICE. Stayed another couple of years at the board of ICE until ICE was itself getting ready to get listed. At which point we needed to, ICE management needed to bring in an independent slate of directors for the purpose of getting itself ready for an IPO. And then I had spent a great deal of time at SocGen. I didn't had any other employee in my life, so I just decided I wanted to do a little bit something else. I did a bit of I wouldn't say out of boredom, but because I wanted to try something else, I did a bit of M&A in oil for a couple of years, a couple of deals. We did book with another banker that left the bank at the time. We had mandates to be first initially as a seller of an oil property in Kazakhstan, and then we advised the other shareholder on the buy side on the second leg of a transaction. That was a one-off because we didn't carry it on. I eventually ended up working for a few years at ABN AMRO in London. And then at ABN AMRO, as you know, split itself into several companies, banks. At the time, ABN AMRO went into a piece into Fortis, a piece into RBS, etc., etc. At the time, I didn't want to wait. So I went to work with Coke Supply and Trading in Geneva for 3 years. And that was in Switzerland. That was something new for me. Very interesting, mixing for the first time in my life the physical trading aspect of things with the paper trading. I learned a lot then. After the Coke period, we are now in 2011. I came back to France, and I started to get more closely involved into, I would call them market infrastructure. There was a failing spot emission quotas trading outfit called Bluenext, which was one of the subsidiary of NYSE, and another I would say a strong shareholder in France called Caisse des Dépôts. And that is a company that had been undergoing a tremendous problems because of a VAT scandal involving the emissions quotas. So we were trying to recover what was left after the end of the scandal with a friend of mine, with the boss. Then we asked me to come as a consultant, trying to find new shareholders and to restructure it. Eventually, it didn't happen, but I got further in touch with the people at NYSE. And at the time, NYSE was the proud owner of Euronext. He had purchased Euronext on its own. So with a view that eventually NYSE buys Euronext, and then ICE buys NYSE. So as a consequence, ICE buys Euronext, and with the idea that Euronext would eventually be spun off as an autonomous entity. I was hired then to be the consultant to design the commodities strategy, if possible, for Euronext becoming independent, which I did, and eventually became the head of commodities market for 3 years at Euronext. I left Euronext 2 years ago, and I'm now with Griffin Markets in London and in Paris, because Griffin Markets is a leading energy OTF in Europe, especially strong in natural gas and power on the OTC side. And today is a special day, actually. Today we are announcing that we are branching out and launching a new activities in next March, to add up an agricultural department to our energy outfit on the OTF. And it just happens so that my former employer was the legacy owners of the futures on corn, on wheat, and on rapeseed. And we are going to try to introduce the OTC solutions that the constituencies of traders do need in Europe, because market is getting very volatile and margin calls can be murderous.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor this JLN video series. In many of the series videos, there are recurring themes of people being helped at critical times in their trading careers. Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person. At Advantage, you are our priority. Everyone needs an edge or advantage when trading. Make us your advantage.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our MarketsWiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.